we're going to start with the law of detachment, but before that, we need to define what deductive reasoning is. So inductive reasoning was based off of observations and patterns. And unlike inductive reasoning, which uses the specific pattern of examples or observations to make a general conclusion, deductive reasoning is the next thing we're going to write. Okay, that's the first blank, deductive. I guess I didn't need to write it that small. Deductive reasoning is based off of rules, laws, facts, things like that. Things that are, I'm going to write it a little bit bigger. Okay, they're general facts, rules, definitions, things that are proven to be true. And we use those to reach a proper, specific, valid conclusion. Okay? So, like, for example, the law says on Mahan, the speed limit is 45. Yeah. Well, if I'm driving 65, what can we assume? So if you break the speed limit, you're going to get a speeding ticket. Right. I'm driving 65, so you can assume I'm going to get a speeding ticket. Okay, so that's what deductive reasoning is based off of rules, definitions, laws, things like that. One law related to let me try that again. One law related to deductive reasoning is the law of detachment. Okay, law of detachment. I'm about to explain it. So it says in this little box where it says words, it says if P, then if P, therefore Q is true statement. Okay, so let's say if you come to class after the bell, then you get a tardy. Okay, so that's my statement. If you come to class after the bell, then you get a tardy. That's my if, the hypothesis, then the conclusion, okay? And then what I would say is that I'm going to pick on, okay, I'll pick on Kingsley. Then I'll say Kingsley came to class after the bell. And then I would say, okay, what conclusion can you make? Yes, Kingsley gets a tardy, right? So my statement says, if my hypothesis, then my conclusion. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, all right, well, my hypothesis happened. So therefore, the conclusion that I could make would be that Kingsley gets a tardy.
So just read it.
Yeah, pretty much. Okay, so that's law of detachment. You said your conditional statement, if this happens, then that happens. And then I'm going to state another statement. If what I'm saying is what my hypothesis is, then my conclusion will be whatever the conclusion is, okay? So like it says up there, if a car is out of gas, then it will not start. And it says Sarah's car is out of gas. So the conclusion we can say is Sarah's car will not start. Make sense? Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, now first, before we actually use the law of detachment, what I want you to do is read through that example A. What I want you to determine is the conclusion that she made based on inductive reasoning, patterns, and observations, or deductive reasoning based on rules and laws and facts. Okay, so read question A. We're just saying inductive or deductive. Is the conclusion that was made based off of patterns and observations, or is the conclusion that was made based off of rules, facts, definitions, things like that? If a student is late returning a library book, then he or she will be charged a $2 late fee. Chang returned a library book late, so he concludes that he will be charged a $2 late fee. Is that inductive or deductive? Patterns and observations or rules and definitions? Deductive, right? Rules and definitions. That was the rule. So we would just write deductive here.
So if it's like a rule, deductive.
If it's something you observe, then it's inductive. So go ahead and do the same thing for B, C, and D. Read each statement. Decide, is the conclusion based off of something that was observed, or is it based off of facts, definitions, things that are... Deductive, no, that's detachment. Deductive is based off of facts and rules. Inductive is based off of what you see. Deductive is based off of observations, things, patterns you see. So, let's see, if I gave you, if I gave you the numbers 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So it's based off that pattern. Does that make sense?
You can see two or not?
Yeah, do B, C, and D. We should not be talking. We should be reading and writing inductive or deductive. We should be paying attention. We should be doing B, C, and D. Decide, is it based off of patterns and observations or rules and definitions? The game was in Boston. Every time Tamika has worn her favorite jersey to a football game, her school's team has won the game. Tamika is wearing her favorite jersey to the football game tonight, so she concludes that her school's team will win the game. Inductive or deductive?
Inductive.
Inductive, yes. All right. C says Newton's first law of motion states that an object at rest will remain at rest unless acted on by an unbalanced force. Alyssa watches a soccer ball roll across the field. She concludes that an unbalanced force has acted upon the soccer ball. What would that be? Deductive, yep. All right, and then D, Miss Jackson notices her family's data usage is increasing by approximately 2,500 megabytes of data every month. So she concludes that her family's data usage next month will be 2,500 megabytes greater than the previous month's data usage. Inductive or deductive? Inductive, based off of a pattern. Okay, so do you guys understand the difference between those? You will have to determine that on the quiz. So I'll give you something and you'll tell me inductive or deductive. Patterns and observations or rules and definitions. All right, so the next thing we are going to actually use the law of detachment. Remember, it's if the hypothesis is true, then the conclusion is true. And then I'm going to restate that hypothesis. If I don't restate the hypothesis, we cannot make a valid conclusion. So it says, to go on a field trip, a student must turn in a permission slip. Okay, so think about putting that in if-then form. If you turn in a permission slip, then you can go on a field trip, correct? Isn't that how we would say that? If you turn in a permission slip, then you can go on a field trip. And then it tells me that Mariana can go on the field trip. Well, we could also turn that around, right? If we go on the field trip, then we turn in a permission slip. So what would you think? If it says she can go on the field trip, what would you think we could say? She did what? She turned in her permission slip, right? So it is valid. And Mariana, this is my conclusion. Okay, it is a valid conclusion, therefore she turned in her permission slip. Okay, look at B. It says if a figure is a square. What is my hypothesis in that statement? A figure is a square. Then it is a polygon. Oh, there's too much right there. Scratch out that last sentence, okay? That's not supposed to be there. Scratch out that last little piece after polygon. Didn't realize that was not supposed to be there. And then what does the conclusion say? It says that figure A is a... Oh.
Huh?
Nothing. I'm reading this wrong. Go ahead. The conclusion says that figure A is a square, so what would we say?
False. Okay, true.
True. And what can we say about figure A? I'm sorry, I was reading those wrong. We were supposed to do something else, but we'll just go with what we got.
It will be like that, like, that's B.
It could.
A, I can understand what B, I don't understand.
Okay. Think of it.
All things like the word, I think like the question.
Okay, so let's say, what if I gave you this? If angle ABC is acute, okay,
Yeah.
then its measure
For
is less than 90, okay?
that's true.
And then that's my statement. If this, then that. And then I say that angle ABC is an acute angle. What would you tell me?
That's true. Valid.
Right, but what would you say after that? What would your conclusion be that you could make?
ABC is
Well, that's what I'm...
ABC is less than that.
There you go. That's what you would make. Okay, so I'm saying my hypothesis, if my hypothesis, then my conclusion, and then I basically restate my hypothesis. So what you would say is the conclusion again, but specific to that angle. Does that make a little bit more sense? Kind of.
I heard that one.
All right.
Thank you for explaining it.
Mm-hmm. All right, so it says determine whether each conclusion is valid based on the given information. Select the correct answer and justification. So you are given that 3 points are non-collinear and they determine a plane. Okay, if 3 points are non-collinear, then they determine a plane. And then it says that points A, B, and C lie in plane G. Okay. Write it up here a second. So, if 3 points are collinear, then they determine a plane. Okay, that's the statement. So my hypothesis is 3 points are collinear. My conclusion is they determine a plane. The next thing that's stated says that points A, B, and C are in plane G. Okay?
What is the? Oh,
It's right there under that example. At the top on the back of the page. See it? Okay. Is everybody looking?
yeah.
So for law of detachment, this is what has to happen. We are given a conditional statement. If our hypothesis, then our conclusion. Then you're going to be given another statement. If that statement is not reiterating the hypothesis, then your conclusion is invalid. Okay? Does this sentence say that? Does this say that A, B, and C are collinear? Does this say that they are collinear?
No.
It doesn't, does it? So, is this a valid conclusion then? No, it's not. So we've got choices C and D. It's either invalid, because they determine a plane, therefore they are non-collinear, or it's invalid because A, B, and C can be collinear and lie in plane G. It's either C or D, because we just determined it was invalid. It says they lie in the same plane, but could we also say... Okay, let's just go with it's invalid. I don't care about the reason. All right. It should be D, but we're going to go with just a valid. I'm not going to ask you to explain that in the test. I'm just going to ask you to say, is it valid or not valid? Does that make sense? Okay. I feel like I haven't done this justice. Hold on just a second. I want to give another example. But I need to pull it up. Get my brain down.
You okay with this?
No, it's Monday and my brain's not working. All right, let me see. Okay. Everybody see my sentence? Yes, okay. All right, so this is my sentence, and then I'm going to say that in order for this to be a valid conclusion from law of detachment.
You gotta say,
My hypothesis says it is Friday. My conclusion says then Hillary will go out to eat. Then I say that Hillary went out to eat. Is that a valid conclusion using law of detachment? It's not. What would this have to say in order for it to be close? It would have to include the word Friday. In order for this to be valid from law of detachment, I would say it is Friday, and then we would be able to make a conclusion that Hillary went out to dinner.
oh, so that was supposed to be the
This has to be repeated here in order for it to be a valid conclusion. Does that make sense? Kind of. I don't know. I feel like I messed that one up. Sorry. All right, let's move on because I'm going to give y'all some. We're going to do a couple of problems at homework together to hopefully clarify that. I feel like I just botched that whole first part. Anyway, the next one, law of syllogism. It is also related to deductive reasoning. Okay, and we're going to write it again, even though it says it. The law of syllogism. This law allows you to draw conclusions from two full conditional statements, two full if-then statements. When the conclusion of the first statement is the hypothesis of the second statement, okay? When the conclusion of the first statement is the hypothesis of the second statement. That's what I'm reading up there. The only thing you had to write is law of syllogism. So what I want you to do is look at that first box where it says example. Okay, my first statement says, if you get a job, then you will earn money, correct? Okay, so I've highlighted the hypothesis and the conclusion if my tablet will catch up with me. It's just being slow. Okay. Then it says, if you earn money, then you can buy a new car. For that second statement, what is my hypothesis? What comes after if in the second statement? You earn money, right? Okay. And then it says you will buy a car. Do you notice how the conclusion in the first statement is exactly the same as the hypothesis in the second? So we can make a valid conclusion based off of that fact right there. And my valid conclusion would be if this first part, I'm trying to change colors, sorry. If this happens, if you get a job, which is what it says right here, my conclusion would be the leftover part. Then you will buy a car. Okay? So, the conclusion in the first statement was the same as the hypothesis in the second statement, which means we can throw those out and make a valid conclusion using law of syllogism from if you get a job, then you will buy a car. Kind of okay with that? All right. Let's take a look at the first one. Okay, it says sleep. Scientists have found that the quality and amount of sleep greatly impact learning and memory. Lack of sleep causes students to have trouble focusing and receiving new information. Sleep deprivation also makes it difficult to retrieve previously learned information. Drawing a valid conclusion from the given statements is impossible. So what I want you to do in that first sentence, where it says given, underline the hypothesis once and the conclusion twice. Underline the hypothesis once and the conclusion twice in that first sentence. All right, what's the hypothesis? If what?
If you don't get enough sleep,
Okay. And then my conclusion would be, then you will be tired. Okay? That's my first statement. I highlighted my hypothesis and conclusion so that I can pay attention to those. Then my second sentence, if you are tired, then you will do not well in your test. What is my hypothesis there?
you didn't get enough sleep.
Mm. What's the hypothesis then? If you are tired,
If you're tired,
and then you will not do well on your test is the conclusion, correct? Let me ask you this. Does the conclusion in my first statement match the hypothesis in my second statement? It does. So therefore, we can make a valid conclusion, and it will look like this. It is going to be the first hypothesis, if you do not get enough sleep.
but that's what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. You're trying to tell me the answer. Then what we basically do is we forget about those two pieces that were the same. We're going to kind of nix those out, and we'll put in that last conclusion. Then you will not do well on your test. Okay? So if the conclusion in the first statement matches the hypothesis in the second statement, then we can make a valid conclusion using law of syllogism. We use the first hypothesis and the second conclusion. If those two don't match, then we just say not valid and we can't make a conclusion. And you just leave it, you just put not valid. Yep. All right. So take a minute and read that second one. See if you think you can make a hypothesis if you can, or sorry, make a conclusion if you can, write it. Okay, we're reading that second example there about the Grand Canyon. It tells you what it's given. I want to know, can you make a valid conclusion using the law of syllogism? If you can, what would it be? We're going to talk about this one and then I'll explain what I just wrote on the board. So basically it gives you this whole paragraph about the Grand Canyon, which really isn't relevant to any of the question. You just really need to read the other part. It says given, right under the example, if Ebony takes a vacation, then she will go to the Grand Canyon. Her next statement says, if Ebony goes to the Grand Canyon, then she will hike the Colorado River. Is the conclusion in the first statement exactly the same as the hypothesis in the second statement? Now let's look at it. What's the conclusion of my first statement? Then she will what?
She will go to the Grand Canyon.
Okay, and then what is the hypothesis in the...
If she goes to the Grand Canyon.
Okay, so are those the same? They both talk about her going to the Grand Canyon?
Yeah.
Then they are the same. All right, words might be different. The words don't have to be exactly the same. The topic has to be the same. All right, so since those match, I can make a valid conclusion. It will be if Ebony takes a vacation, write that down. If Ebony takes a vacation, okay, leaving out the highlighted portions, then she will what? She said she will hike the Colorado River? Yes. Then she will hike the Colorado River. Okay. Because the conclusion in the first statement was the same as the hypothesis in the second statement, we can make a valid conclusion. If Ebony takes the vacation, then she will hike the Colorado River. Okay. Now, on these next two, it's going to be very similar to what we will have to do on the quiz. I'm going to ask you, tell me your conclusion, and did you use law of detachment or law of syllogism? Okay. Now, I know variables scare you with math, and especially when we're talking about words, but it's easier to write variables than write a whole sentence. So if P, then Q. So if my hypothesis, then Q. And then I just restate my hypothesis saying that it is true, okay? Using the law of detachment, I can then write a conclusion just restating that Q is true. Okay? If it is raining outside, then I will use my umbrella. And then I say, it is raining outside. So your conclusion would be, yeah, I used my umbrella, right? Okay. So detachment is one if-then statement, and then it just restates the hypothesis. That's how you tell the difference. Syllogism is two full if-then statements. If P, then Q. If Q, then R. Because these match, then I can make a valid conclusion of the leftover parts. If P, then R. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. Now let's see. The directions say, draw a valid conclusion. Sorry, I can't read that when it's messed up like that. From the given statements, if possible, state which law you will use. Did you use detachment? Do you have just one if-then statement or syllogism of two? Okay, also, does it work? So the first one says, if it rains, then flowers will grow. If it rains, then flowers will grow. And then it tells you that it will rain. That's detachment, yep. So what could I say then?
True.
It is true by detachment, yes, but what would my conclusion be? Okay, it is law of detachment, but what would I say? I still have to make a conclusion. If it rains, then flowers will grow. Then I said it will rain, so you will tell me flowers will grow, exactly. Okay. My hypothesis was it rains. My conclusion was then flowers will grow. Then I just restated my hypothesis, so therefore I can say my conclusion is true.
You can leave that on the board. Well, you can have that on the board for tomorrow.
You mean the day we take our quiz?
Yeah.
Maybe. I'll think about it. Okay, I want you to try number 2. If there are 2 points on a grid, then a line can be drawn through them. And that's my first if-then statement. If 2 points are on a grid, then a line can be drawn through them. Then it tells me that 2 points are graphed on a grid. Did I just restate my hypothesis? I did, didn't I? So therefore, I can say the conclusion. What conclusion can I say? That a line, whoops. Sorry. A line can be graphed, or can be drawn through those 2 points. Detachment or syllogism?
It's a syllogism.
Syllogism has 2 if-then statements. Did I give you 2 if-then statements? I only gave you one, right? So it would be detachment. Okay, let's read number 3. If Cody is not on time, then he will be fired. If Cody is fired, then Ashanti will get his job. That is syllogism because I have 2 full if-then statements. Does the conclusion in the first statement match the hypothesis in the second statement? I just highlighted them. Do they match? Do they both say something about somebody being fired? They do. So what I can say then is if Cody is not on time, the leftover pieces, if Cody is not on time, then Ashanti will get his job.
So this
Yep. Okay, that is syllogism, yes. Okay, do that last one. Read what it gives you, and then determine if you can make a conclusion that it be because of detachment or syllogism. Okay, if I get good grades, my parents are happy. If my parents are happy, then I get to go to the party. What would we say? Syllogism, and my conclusion would be if I get good grades, then what happens? Then I get to go to the party. Okay, and that is syllogism.